We are continuing in Matthew chapter 5 today. And really, this text marks where we get past the introduction to the holistic Sermon on the Mount into some of the brass tacks, some of the major takeaways. Jesus once again presenting a radical reorientation of even what the religious people of his day thought was what it meant to walk in righteousness, what it meant to walk in holiness. Jesus is going to address topics from here on out that may even be offensive to us, and yet they are the words of Christ nonetheless. And so as we get into Matthew chapter 5, starting in verse 21, we remember that he began this with the Beatitudes, and then he moved on to say that we are salt and light to the world. And last week he said he did not come to abolish the Old Testament, but to fulfill it. And that serves as this backdrop for what he's going to say next. Let's go to the word. We are in Matthew chapter 5, starting in verse 21. You have heard it said to those of old, you shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council. And whoever says, you fool, will be liable to the hell of fire. So if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First, be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge and the judge to the guard, and you be put in prison. Truly, I say to you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. One of the things we do here at Not Having a Christian Church is we believe that God speaks before we speak, and we don't skip hard passages. And friends, I believe that this is a hard passage. But I believe that this is the way of Christ. And if we break this down for what it means to us in practical steps to evidence Jesus, even in our regular relationships, friends, not only will we be blessed, but we, in this way, will be salt and light to the world. The start of verse 21 is going to be this phrase that Jesus is going to use a bunch more times in the Sermon on the Mount. He's going to say, you have heard it said, in this case, to those of old. And he's going to quote, either verbatim or in some sort of a synthesis, stuff from the Old Testament. And the thing he quotes here in verse 21 is the sixth commandment of the Big Ten. You know those Big Ten that are written on the stones that Moses carried down from the mountain? Jesus says, verse 21, you have heard it said to those of old, you shall not murder. And then he includes this other kind of like summary from a different Old Testament book. And whoever murders will be liable to judgment. This is what the Old Testament says. But I say to you, verse 22. Man, Jesus speaking out of the context of his authority. God in the flesh here. The Savior, the Lamb who is going to the cross and sometime forward. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Man, we have a complicated relationship with anger. Anger is a natural human emotion because we are made in God's image. This is a longer conversation to be had at some other time, but the reason that we feel, in general, the things that we feel is because we are created in the image of God who shares that with us. So let's not mince words here. For certain things, God is angry. And for certain things, God is overjoyed. For certain things, the Bible describes God as being sad. And in other cases, God is described as throwing a party. In the Old Testament prophet Zephaniah, when God saves his people, God is described as rejoicing and singing loudly over his people. But let's hone it back into anger here. I do not believe that Jesus is saying that anger in any and every expression is completely off limits. In fact, because later, Jesus is going to get quite angry about a variety of things. Look at how he sandwiches not only the emotion, the expression of anger, with these actions. We're in verse 22 again. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. And then look at how he continues. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council. And whoever says, "You fool," will be liable to the hell of fire. So it's not just anger as a conceptual category. This is what we are angry over. A bunch of ancient commentators, when they were either writing this or copying this or speaking about this, they would say, whoever is angry without cause. And we are told in other places in the New Testament that anger itself is not the issue. What are you going to do about it? Quick cross-reference. If we remember back to one of our studies last year, the book of Ephesians, in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 26, the Apostle Paul tells Christ followers, be angry, but do not sin. There is a huge difference between justified and righteous anger versus that which is not justified and leads us to hurt people. Ephesians 4, be angry and do not sin. Look at how the Apostle Paul goes into the next phase here. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. He's saying, this is a part of life. But just because we are angry does not mean that we have to devolve into sin. Furthermore, we've got a moral responsibility to resolve these things as fast as we can. And I think it's really important that we look at what he says next. Ephesians 4:27. Give no opportunity to the devil. Man, the devil will use whatever crack, whatever slightly tilted open window in our life to try to get in and try to derail stuff. And friends, don't we really just know from life that anger is one of those places? Can I just real talk before small talk? How often have we done things that we are proud of out of anger? For real. Think about it. And even, let's just say, even when our anger is justified. You know, I'm in this new category in my life. I have been a commuter my entire life. But for the past 13 months, I have also had this tiny human called my son who is in a car seat. Which I just say as an aside, takes up so much space in my car, and my car is smeared with milk and Cheerios and all the rest, right? But that's beside the point. Let me tell you, quite honestly, SoCal freeways, you have to be from Southern California to even understand what we're talking about. This is the Wild West. This is Mad Max. We are one environmental disaster away from attaching spikes to our trucks and just hashing it out on the 91. And I've experienced this my whole life. But now I've got my 1-year-old in the car. And so when that dude zips around me and does something stupid on the road, I use the word foolish intentionally, and we're going to see this in a moment as we get back to chapter 5 of Matthew. They do something foolish on the road. I am experiencing a new level of anger in my life because it's not just me now, it's my family. You guys know what I mean? And so here, I am balancing in my life Be angry, but do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. It is not the anger itself, but it's what you do with it. And so notice as we get back into Matthew chapter 5, Jesus qualifies this is what unacceptable anger looks like in the covenantal community. And in this case, he's describing a bunch of slander. I want to pick back up in Matthew 5:22 just to get our context. But I say to you, everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. Whoever insults his brother will be liable to the council. And whoever says, "You fool," will be liable to the hell of fire. You know, sometimes the Bible gets a bad rap for talking about hell, for talking about punishment. But the single biblical character that speaks about hell more than anybody else is Jesus Christ. This is how serious he is about this. It's interesting, as Matthew records this, he records what that word sounded like in Aramaic. That word, "you fool," is rakah. Doesn't that just sound bad? Can you imagine someone yelling that on the freeway? Raka! You don't know what it means, but you know they're mad. You know what I mean? Weirdly enough, that's not even that intense of a word. And Jesus is going to use it elsewhere. The Bible is going to use that word and other words within its category elsewhere in right ways. But remember, we are talking about anger that is without a cause. You know, other commentators and translators, instead of the word "you fool," have posed these options: nitwit, blockhead, numbskull, bonehead. None of which I find to be as aggressive as raka. Guys, it's not even about how heinous the word is. It's about your heart posture. We don't have to just draw the line at dropping F-bombs. It's about our heart posture, man. An anger that leads us to condemn somebody. Righteous anger doesn't condemn, but sinful anger does. And we're reminded on how Jesus begins this thing. You have heard it said of old, "You shall not murder." But I'm saying, do not have murderous thoughts and anger in your heart. You don't ever have to pick up the weapon because God looks at your heart. He's looking at your intent, man. You know, the great reformer Martin Luther speaks about how we love in the midst of our anger. He says that an anger of love, one that wishes no one evil, one that is friendly to the person, but hostile to the sin. As far as I can tell, that might be the historical root for the common phrase, "Love the sinner, but hate the sin." But I do believe that that is a good starting place. Friends, we can encounter righteous anger over a variety of things. I believe that I was righteously angry when drug dealers in Hemet kept on giving my sister methamphetamines. I believe that I was righteously angry when one of my students edited a bunch of emails to say things I didn't say and emailed them directly to my president. Guys, we can be righteously angry over all kinds of stuff in our life, but what do we do about it? It is unacceptable for the Christ follower to lash out, to condemn others, and to be aggressive in this respect. Instead, Jesus calls us to be reconcilers. As we move into verse 22, man, this is wild, man. This is wild and radical obedience. Verse 22 of chapter 5 says, so if you are offering your gift at the altar, like he's picturing an Old Testament thing. You are literally at the temple, man. The Ark of the Covenant is inside that building. And you are just outside with the priest, and you have brought your gift to God. In that circumstance that Jesus requires, he says, so if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there you remember that your brother has something against you. I mean, let's kind of dress this in maybe more modern terms. You show up to church, and you've got communion in your hand. What the New Testament calls a sacrifice of praise, an offering of praise. And you have this in your hand, and I'm going to up the ante. You've also tore off the top little plastic thing. And so you've got this thing open in your hand, right? Which is sometimes hard, I admit, but I'm sorry. In that context, in that moment, look at what Jesus says. Let's just pick it up from the beginning of the verse 23. So if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother has something against you, verse 24, leave your gift. Leave your gift there before the altar and go. Can I be totally honest with you? That's not what I expected him to say. Like, quite frankly, in my feeble way of thinking, I would have expected him to say, offer your gift, do what you have vowed, and then once you're in a calm heart posture, then go. That's not what Jesus says. You have your gift in your hands, and you are ready to offer this. You are ready to sing. You are ready to take communion. You are ready to give financially, whatever else that might mean, right? You have your gift in your hand, and you remember that you've got some beef with somebody. And even more than that, like Jesus is pretty explicit here, you remember that your brother has something against you, so in this scenario, you're in the wrong. Though I don't think that excludes the other side of the coin. And I think we could probably summarize, there's conflict, man. There's division. Verse 24, leave your gift before the altar and go. First, be reconciled to your brother, and then come and offer your gift. So important is reconciliation. Reconciliation means that we bring together two estranged parties. We are peacemakers, as Jesus said in the Beatitudes. And once again, friends, this is not something that God says in a vacuum. Do as I say, not as I do. I am just reminded at all of the places where the way that God reconciles us is described in the text, but just for the sake of time, maybe one of the clearest, Romans chapter 5, verse 10. If while we were enemies, we were reconciled to God by the death of his Son, much more now that we are reconciled, shall we be saved by his life. Jesus gives us a pattern for reconciliation. And I am not saying that our reconciliation one to another is equitable in any way with the way that God reconciles us to himself. But I'm at the very least saying that it is adjacent. And God is saying, live out your faith and be salt and light in this world by virtue of reconciling. What this takes is us getting past our anger. What this takes is recognizing that this other person is made in the image of God. Friends, this takes boldness. This takes an incredible trust that God's going to do what he's going to do. But on our end, it takes urgency. I think this is part of the problem. This is my problem. Friends, I want to admit to you, just full confession, I'm like studying this text to preach this Sunday. And I realize this week there's a call I need to make. That before I stand on this stage, I have to go do this. All of us are in the same boat, guys. The point that he resolves on is one of urgency. Like in verse 23, 24, it's the brother who has a problem. Look at verse 25 and 26. Come to terms quickly with your accuser. Now it's no longer a brother, it's an accuser. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are going with him to court, lest your accuser hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you be put in prison. Truly I say, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. That's a pretty dramatic illustration, but the point is made. Jesus says, reconcile now. Don't wait. Don't put it off. Don't set some ethereal date in the future. Oh, I'm going to do this when I absolutely have to because in this scenario, I'm standing in front of the judge. Don't wait for that court date. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Friends, hear me on this. Something I have observed in life, there's no perfect moment for reconciliation except for now. Now is the perfect moment. Guys, we held off on communion until this point for a reason. And I'm going to invite our band back up on stage. And here's what we're going to do with the rest of our service. About once a month, we have an opportunity for corporate prayer. And so we are going to take a minute of reflection. And here's the issue, man. If you follow Jesus Christ, this is our offering in our hand that we are bringing to the altar. And Jesus says, if you are bringing your gift to the altar and therein recognize or remember, he says, that your brother has something against you, leave your gift. First, go and be reconciled, and then come and offer your gift. What we're going to do is we're going to carve out some time for that. And no joke, in full humility, no judgment whatsoever. Friends, this is us being angry and not sinning, not letting the sun go down on our anger. This is us being reconcilers in the way that Jesus Christ is a reconciler. And so here's what's going to happen. I'm going to invite our leadership to the front of this room. These are going to be pastors and deacons and life group leaders, folks from around our church who are called to ministry in a variety of ways, and we're just going to open the floor for congregational prayer, and I'm asking you to do one of four things in this moment. One of the things you can do, if you're thinking, and by God's grace, you're thinking, man, Jesus has done such an amazing work on my life, like, I don't know of any conflict with anybody because Christ reigns and he has worked in my life. Praise God for that. I'm asking you instead to take this Easter card and pray for the person you're going to give it to. Pray that in 2 weeks, maybe that one person whom God has put in your life to share the gospel with might receive this well, and we might see them in 2 weeks to hear the gospel of Jesus. Something else you can do is you can come up to any one of our prayer partners. And there are no barriers on this, man. We pray about everything here at Knott Avenue. Maybe right now, hearing this message of reconciliation, you're thinking, I need to be reconciled to God. Per Romans 5, I am an enemy, and I need him to make it right in my life. Maybe you need to follow Jesus today. Or just maybe, with our gift in our hand, we realize my brother, my sister has something against me. and I need to walk across this room. Or I need to go to the lobby and I need to get on the phone. Or I literally need to miss this last song and the blessing for the road and get in my car and drive to their house. The urgency with which Jesus calls his disciples to reconcile is palpable. It has substance to it, friends. And I'm asking you if God is putting that on your heart to take that step of obedience today. I'm going to turn off my mic and we're going to open the floor. If you have a prayer request of any kind, please come up. But also use this time to pray in advance for the gospel to spread, to pray for reconciliation for our brothers and sisters, and if you so need to do so, to go and be reconciled. This is your time as God moves. Please allow him to direct your steps.